and then you can start.
Okay. Hi, everybody. This is Karen Malone Wright, the founder of the NotMom, a site and a resource for women without children by choice or by chance. That means child-free or childless. You walk a different path than the friends you have who are moms. You don't necessarily hate kids, but you sure don't have them either. This is my brand partner, Laura Lavoie. Hi, Laura.
Hey, Karen, how you doing?
I'm fine on this hot August day. Would you like to explain the code of conduct and our basic rules for folks, and then we can get going?
Absolutely. So because of the type of site we are, we have some rules. Since we incorporate both not moms that are by chance and by choice, we want to make sure that we have a welcoming space for everybody. So it's a welcoming space that listens, understands, encourages, and embraces women without children by choice or by chance. So we have a couple of important rules as far as that goes. Many of our friends are moms, so the use of mean girl terms to describe them, their children, or other not moms living with a different experience is completely unacceptable on our website. So we want to make sure that you know, coming in, we want you to chat, we want you to be a part of the conversation, but just know that we don't tolerate any sort of mean girl conversation. So we'd love to have you participate in our conversation because we have a pretty cool conversation coming up today, right, Karen?
Yes, we do. Our guest today.
Yes. So we are.
Sorry, I was hearing a little echo.
Oh, no worries. Yes, our guest today is Robin Bachman from the U.S. Census Bureau. I'm going to add Robin to the podcast. Robin, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me this afternoon.
Excellent. We'd love to hear a little bit about you. So tell us about yourself before we get talking about the census a little bit.
Oh, sure. And thanks again, Laura, for having me on today. I'm coming to you from Northern Virginia, so right outside of Washington, D.C. The Census Bureau is headquartered in Suitland, Maryland, which is really close to Andrews Air Force Base, if anyone knows the area over here. So basically, we're greater Washington, D.C. Like everyone else around me, I'm 100% work from home right now. So I haven't been to my building since March. So it has been, it's been interesting trying to do the work from home. So, but safety first. And so we're 100% work from home right now. So I've been with the Census Bureau. I came back in 2014. I was in Cleveland, Ohio. I worked for the Sisters of Charity Health System for since that was like 2005 to 2000, so 9 years. And then I came back to Census in 2014. I'm a bounce back. I was at the Census Bureau in 2000. So this is my second decennial census. And I've served in the federal government in a couple other capacities as well. I am originally from Ohio, from closer to Dayton, Ohio, though. So if you know the Ohio landscape, I'm from the southern part, or like Karen's coming to you from the Cleveland area. What else? Oh, I'm a not mom. So I don't have kids. I'm childless. Unless you count my fur girl, and that's Eva Bell. She's an 8-year-old pit bull mix. Her nickname is Eva Diva. She's a little bit of a prima donna. And she very well might join the podcast today. So
exciting.
Exactly. So we'll just do it.
I'm interrupting enough to say that Robin and I work together at the Sisters of Charity of St. Augustine here in Cleveland, Ohio. And so we were friends already, and then she became or bounce back, as she says. And Robin, I feel like you are the only person I know who knows how to easily say the word decennial.
Oh, decennial. Yeah.
It basically means every 10 years, right? It's exactly. Like centennial. Okay.
Yeah. No. And actually, the 2010 census, I was in Cleveland working for the Sisters, so I was a partner on that side of the effort in 2010. But I joined the Census Bureau in 2014, so I've been back a little more than 6 years. And my job now, and why I think y'all invited me, is I am chief of the National Partnership Program, which is part of the Communications Directorate at the U.S. Census Bureau. And so my job, along with a team of us, is to get out the word that the census is here and that everyone should participate. And we ask organizations like NotMom to help us get the word out that it's important to do, it's safe to do, it's easy to do.
So we're now a national partner.
Yes, you are. Thank you so much.
Yes, we are. So let's start, Robin, with, when I realized you were, back at the census, and we were talking, and one of the first things I wanted to ask you about was this statistic that I had been using for so long, saying that the number of American women without children was at the lowest level since the census started counting women without children in the 70s, in the 1970s census. And you explained to me that there are different shades of the census and its reporting, that yes, I was telling the truth, but the way that we word it is important. Can you explain that just a little bit?
Sure. And I should say that my background is public policy and communications. So if there are demographers or statisticians out there watching, feel free to put in the chat. The Robin's only half right, but with that caveat, I would say it's a good lead into the Census Bureau, Karen, the question, because the census has more than, I think it's about 150 collections of information that we do annually. And we collect information both on demographics, so people, populations, fertility, and then we also collect information on the economy. And so we do a lot of work with businesses, and we are the ones who actually do the information collection and the release of a lot of the economic indicators that you see coming out on a monthly basis, trying to inform the country and decision makers about how we're doing when it comes to the economy. So the census is the premier statistical agency in the United States. And so we are the ones who are measuring the country, whether it's the economic side or the demographic side. And so there's a ton that we could talk about. My colleague, Jenny Aramoni, who I think you've met, actually came from the economic side of the program. So we could geek out with Jenny one day if we would like to talk about like manufacturing or something. But to get to the heart of your question, so the decennial census or the 2020 census, which is everywhere, and hopefully you're seeing a ton of ads and a lot of. Okay, good.
And on my Facebook feed and my Twitter feed, yes, you guys are everywhere.
We're trying. We got to count everybody, so we're trying to get the word out. So the decennial census is that backbone or the spine of all of our data collections because it's 100% census. So we need to do this every 10 years to inform all of our other information. So that's one of the reasons why the decennial census or the 2020 census is so important. But to your example, the survey that actually produces the data around childless women is the current population survey. And so that one is its own collection, but in its title, you hear the word current population survey. So it's a sample. It's not 100% census like the 2020 census, but it relies on the information we collect in the 2020 census to inform the work that it does. It collects that information. It's actually a fascinating survey. The CPS is done jointly with us, the Census Bureau, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. There are a number of other statistical agencies across the U.S. government. Unlike some countries where the statistical office is very uniform and very organized at one place, the U.S. government statistical agencies, we have I think it's about 13 other statistical agencies across the federal government. And so we all work together. And BLS is an excellent example of one of the other agencies that does a lot of information collection. So we conduct the current population survey together. And that survey is chock-a-block full of a ton of information. So it's the same survey that produces our unemployment number every month. It's the same survey that puts out our poverty estimate that we do in September. It's actually, that one's coming September 15th, I believe. It's the same survey that puts out our income data, our health insurance data. And then they have a fertility supplemental for that. And so that's where CPS puts out that numbers. And so those numbers. So what you saw June of 2018 was the release of the fertility numbers for women. And I would encourage y'all to actually go deeper into the data because there's a lot of information in there. And I saw you all quote it. So Karen, when you'd asked me about how do I cite the census, I encourage you to cite CPS and U.S. Census Bureau,
Right?
Because there are different surveys that we can source for the information. And then that survey had data around women 15 to 50 and their fertility rates. And I believe it was 44.2% of women were childless. And that's based upon fertility. So my question would be to also look at what do they factor in adoption in that as well? So those are the types of questions that are good questions to ask whenever you're seeing some of the statistics. So that long answer to your question.
Long answer, but clear. We want to be clear. Can you take a wild guess as to when the updated number will come out from the next CPS that is generated from the 2020 census?
I actually will take that question back, and maybe Jenny, who I think is watching, could take a look to see if CPS does it annually. If we use the poverty number, that's an annual supplemental, so I'm wondering if the fertility supplemental is also annual. That's probably my guess, but we'll try to get an answer before the close of the show.
Okay.
Sure. Awesome.
But poverty is one of those, for those of us who did a lot of social justice work or do social justice work, it's an excellent release that's coming September 15th. And that one is an annual example. Whereas CPS for unemployment, we do that one monthly. So it really depends on the flow of the data product.
Gotcha. So Robin, where are we right now with the 2020 census schedule? What are we looking at moving forward? Some of us got it back in April. Some of us filled it out right away. I know that we have a deadline. So where are we with that right now?
Laura, that's a great question. One that if you would have asked me March 2nd, would it be a different answer than we are on this day in August. So like the rest of the world, COVID-19 just walloped us. And so we were knee deep in operations. So we really do our first collection of information for the decennial of the 2020 census in January. It's fun and exciting and also rather cold. We go to rural Alaska and we send the director up there. We usually send them either like in a dog sled or in like one of those flat planes because we have to do the count when the ground is frozen for Alaska. And so
that's very logical.
And also, I don't know why, I just get a kick out of it too. I know the people who live in Alaska are like, Robin, quit being so silly, but that is our first enumeration we do in January because of the ground being frozen, so we can go do the count. And so that started in January, and then we roll out for the rest of the country, and it was around the second week in March where we opened up the internet instrument so that people could go online to fill out the form. Or we did a mailing for some households. They get the questionnaire in paper right away, depending on their internet connectivity. Or they could go and call us by phone to do the census. So all that started in March. And our original plan was to have the data collection go till the end of July. Well, around March 16th, I know I got locked down to work from home, and we paused our census operations, our field operations, because of the pandemic, because we needed to keep the public safe, and we needed to keep our census takers and our census workers safe. So we paused our field operations, but we kept the internet option of self-response and by phone, and also they could mail back the paper questionnaire, all open during that time. So that's been that has been the sort of one of the gifts of everything going on, that the internet self-response has actually, knock on wood, been really good. Like we were concerned because, we're counting more than 330 million people, that, something could go wrong with the internet self-response, but it's been a great workhorse to do the collection. So that's been going on since March. And then again, people can also call us by phone to do the census over the phone if they don't have internet connection, or for whatever reason maybe they would like some language help, because we have 13 languages that we can help in by phone. And then the paper version, for some people, they would like a paper questionnaire. And so we did mail to non-responding households. I want to say we mailed it April. So we mailed out to everyone who we hadn't heard from yet a paper questionnaire, so they can mail it back. So Laura, long answer again. So we thought we would be done pre-COVID by July 31st of collecting our information, but then pandemic, and then you're like, well, now what do we do? So we paused our field operations, and so we just started. Today actually is the day that we went nationwide to send our census takers out to follow up with those households who we've not heard from. We have
for viewers in the future.
Yes, I'm sorry, Karen. Yeah, thank you. Please keep an eye out and be nice to those census takers. So we have about 63.1. It's a little more than 63% of the country who have responded. So that's super cool that we have much more than half of the country that's responded. The flip side is thank you, Karen.
I did as well.
So Title 13 would say, I couldn't tell people that you responded, but you're allowed to self-disclose that you responded. So thank you. And we can get into Title 13 in a little bit. But so we have less than 40% of the country to count. And because of the deadline, we were advised recently that the extension that we thought might happen for the release of the apportionment counts is not coming. And so as an operation, we had to say, okay, if we have to deliver apportionment counts by December 31st, this means that we have to wrap up the data collection or the information collection by September 30th. So what is the date today? We're August 9th. So we have a good chunk of August left, and then all of September, and then we're done with data collection, because we have to then start doing that back end processing of the information so that we can release apportionment counts to Commerce and the President by December 30th. So 31st. Yes, Karen.
There's just a little bit of Greek in what you're saying there, lady. What do you mean when you talk about apportionment? Help us. Is that the part that the census actually is so important for? Is apportioning the federal money to help us all in our individual communities? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes and no. But before I forget, Jenny just sent me a little note so that I don't forget to share. So the fertility supplemental for the current population survey, or the CPS, is an every 2-year collection. And she says our current plan is to release those data later this year. So stay tuned for an update to the fertility data that you saw in 2018.
Fertility data to us first. It's okay.
Yeah.
We won't get
as soon as we can.
So you had a little preview, Karen. Sorry, no, we're not.
So with the deadline being the end of September, obviously it's really, really important to get as many people counted by then. Why is it? I guess I have a two-part question. Why is it important to get counted, and who is less likely to be counted, and how can we improve those rates? Like, how can we get involved to get people, to respond?
Mm-hmm. No, thanks, Laura. And let me also touch on Karen's question from a minute ago about apportionment count. So,
oh yes,
because I'll forget. So the apportionment counts is the first major data product that is required statutorily to release. And so those are the population counts of every state. And so that is determining how many representatives each state gets. And so if you remember 10 years ago, Ohio, I think, lost a seat. Like it's for these data for instance. So these are the data that determine how many seats the states get for Congress. And so that's the apportionment count. And it is solely a population count by state. And then we have a panoply of other data products that we roll out afterwards. And so the next major set of data products that come out are for redistricting. And so redistricting are the inside the lines. So you have the state, and then you have to draw the district lines for how all things are, for the most part, for representation. So both those, members of Congress that we're talking about, but all the state legislatures, school boards, like anything that's based upon districts, we release that data. And that's why when you hear us, Laura, talk about why it's so important, we have to get it right. We have to have we have to count the person once, only once, and in the right place. So the census isn't just a population count, it's also a where you live count. So that geography is so important for so many different reasons. And those data will come out, they have to re-announce the plan on when those data, my understanding they were shooting for July for redistricting data, but I'm not sure because we just did a replan on the apportionment data announcement. And then the other stuff that comes out is also equally exciting. So because we collect characteristics, so we collect demographic information, we collect ethnicity, we collect age, all those things that make up the tapestry of America, that's what we're collecting right now. And then we roll that out as data products throughout the next year or plus, like it will depend. So so for so many of our partners that we work with, they know the apportionment count's important. They know the redistricting data is important, but they also want the juicy information about what what does the country look like and who lives here and what are the age shifts perhaps, or what are the migratory shifts of working. And so it's all that stuff that we will roll out over the next many, 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 many months.
And Robert, the census, I'm not looking at my notes, but it seems to me the census is not just for mainland and, the 50 states. It also, is it 7 or 8 territories, the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico,
Guam, American Samoa, Marshall Islands. Yes, we count all the territories and Puerto Rico. So, and those are different. So Puerto Rico and the territories actually will have a little bit of a different census, but it's at the same time. And so, yes, it's important for both the continental United States, but then all of our territories as well. And they're on the same timing as us. So to Laura's question, Laura, remind me, was it on the sort of why it's important and who do we miss? Were those the two parts of your question?
Yes, especially, why it's important and who is most likely to be missed, thus making it more important to get the word out, like we are doing today. So, especially with the, speeding up the process, having everything done by September 30th. So those are exactly the questions.
Thank you. So the why it's important, and I bet a bunch of our listeners could also add some thinking. So our data are used, they're official statistics, right? And so we did a study, but it's a few years old now, that $675 billion in federal funding is distributed based upon census data. So $675 billion. That's each year too. So that's an awful lot of money. And that's everything.
That down, $675 billion.
Yeah.
And you divide all that up based on what the results to the census are.
Exactly.
Wow. So
you need good data, right? So, and if you look at some of our partner organizations, some of the think tanks, they've actually, since I said that study's a few years old, they've actually upped that study again. And I've seen data now, it's 1.5 trillion, but that's based upon their partner numbers. And I think what they're adding in is sort of the state monies that are also distributed. So if you think about it, there's a real multiplier moment happening. So we release the data, the feds determine how the different programming gets distributed based upon our numbers, but then the states also use our data, and then the localities use our data. And so that's where you can see the 675 is probably a low estimate, but it's the one that Census did a few years ago. And if anyone wants to geek out with us, we have that study on our website. So, but let's talk about what that means, though, Karen, to your point. So It's Head Start. It's food and nutrition programs like SNAP. It's WIC. It's school districts. So Title I is a good example. It's HHS, so Medicaid and Medicare use population data to help determine how much the states get to distribute. And that's one of actually the bigger programs that use the population data. It's veterans programming. It's transportation, so it's roads, it's bridges, it's so much of information has to be based upon data. And so you need good trusted data sources like the 2020 census. And so you have to refresh that every 10 years. And so that's what these data are about. But to Laura's question, this is where the rub comes in. And this is where, like my colleague Jenny and I just breathe deep and try to figure out other ways that we can get the word out, because we don't want to miss people. And so we've done the census, the decennial census, every decade since 1790.
You were
Huh? No, it was not. Now I'm moisturized. Right around. Yeah, so we've done it every 10 years since 1790. And, we did not get it right at the beginning. I mean, we could talk about the fact that, slaves were 3/5. I mean, there's like a lot of history if you think about the census and how the data were used. We did not count American Indians for the longest time. So, I mean, we have improved our work over the decades, but we have been around since 1790. So we're part of the tapestry and the history of the country. And so we have also, because we check our work, so we go back after we do the census towards the end and actually do a post-enumeration survey. So it's the PES, post-enumeration survey, and we're the ones who released to the public that we missed people. So when you hear undercounts or differential undercounts, those are based upon our data that we went back and checked our work and said, hey, it looks like we missed some people. And obviously there's other policy folks that also check our work too, but just know that for us, we do not want undercounts. We don't want overcounts either. And we also don't want differential undercounts. And what do I mean by differential undercounts? That means certain communities are undercounted compared to others. So young children, 0 to 5, for whatever reason, we missed 1 million kids last decade. So yeah. And so there's a lot of thinking that part of it is probably if the little one lives in, more than one house, like maybe between parents, or maybe lives at the grandma's or is in foster care, whatever the sort of the complex household that has affected it. But that's 1 million kids. So and we don't do the census again for 10 years. So we don't have those kids showing up in the data for more than 10 years. We miss African Americans and other persons of color, American Indians, Hispanic and Latino communities more than we miss white populations. So there's an undercount there. LGBTQ communities, we miss a lot of LGBTQ residents, and they do not get counted. We miss rural. So if you hear, and there's some good studies on our site, but part of it is also hard to reach. So it's hard to count, and hard to count might be because there's a distrust of government for whatever reason. So hard to count, or that the person's working 3 jobs and it's just not a priority to fill out my government survey. You know what I mean? And so there's a number of reasons why we miss folks on the hard to reach and then the hard to count. So they're the same, but they're different. So rural might be a good example of maybe we didn't get penetration in our advertising deep enough into the rural community. Maybe it could be distrust of government for different reasons. And so Laura, there's my team we're divided into 22 audiences is how we approach the work to try to think through how we can get to each community that has been historically hard to count. And then, yeah, go ahead, Karen.
I can't tell you where on the vast internet or television I saw this, but I want to say it was a congressional representative talking about how if a person who was in a community of color, that's such a long politically correct way to say it. If they didn't do the census, if they never completed it through any of its forms, the government sort of automatically assumed that person is white. It seemed kind of crazy when I heard it, and partly because I always thought if you don't do the census, you just don't do the census. You're not counted. But the implication was that the government, in some of its forms, assumes that the person in that house is white, even though they have no proof of that. Is that true?
Yeah, no, I think I actually know which partner did that ad. I saw it as well. And so are you up for a little statistical conversation?
No.
Oh, okay.
We get a little statistical conversation.
Well, it was a yes/no question. Is that true or is that internet BS? And second, just the short answer is fill out your damn census.
Yeah, no, that is my answer for that. So it isn't internet BS in the sense that, so you heard me at the very beginning talk about this is 100% count. It's a census. It's not a survey. We have to get everybody. And we take the decade to update our master address file. And that master address file informs our collections going forth for the next 10 years. Like you heard me talk about the whole backbone sort of idea. Because it is mandated to do 100% census, we use statistics in some places when that moment happens. And it happens when we don't get a self-response from that person. So you're absolutely right. Please, person who is in that little graphic, fill out your form. Self-identify. It's a celebration of who you are. It's about human dignity. Fill out your form, please. We keep the data confidential.
That's what commercial I need.
Exactly. We need to screenshot or take a little clip of that because that's exactly what is the right message for sure.
I got to tell you, lady, it's friend of my heart. I mean, you have so much information within you, but right there's where I saw the passion you have for the census and what the work you're doing. I mean, that was all so heartfelt.
And it's why I came back. I mean, we're all motivated by different work, right? And for me, the mission of making sure that everyone is counted is what motivates me. Because in your example, Karen, we will have to do imputation, which is that moment. So if we didn't hear from the household, we know that there's somebody in that house, and we don't have any other way to figure out who's in that house. We will impute, and we'll impute by characteristics in the neighborhood. So if that lady or that man who happened to be African American lives in a neighborhood of all white people, that we will impute that person. And this is again, go back to my comments about Robin Jane is not a statistician, but this is and so this is where we have to make some informed decisions. And so we'll also try, but to be fair to my colleagues who do the statistics.
No, it's logical. I mean, I'm just saying, it's very logical what you're saying. If I'm in a community where there are literally 2 Black people within 6 blocks, it's logical to assume the lady in that house is going to be white. I get that. I just wondered, I mean, to me, that's something that is very, as a communicator or marketer myself, that's a very hard thing to say. And say it clearly the way the truth is. Answer the census so that no assumptions are made about you, your family, and where you live and how you exist in this beautiful country. I mean, at the end of the day, that's it. And it makes sense, I mean, because whatever setting I heard that clip on, made it seem like, the census is racist. They're going to assume you're white. Oh, yeah, they're going to assume you. How many times do I drive down a certain street and I'm stunned there's a black person living in the house? I mean, why wouldn't they assume? So I'm personally, I ain't mad at you. I totally get it. And I intend to get off this podcast and tell all of my brown and Black friends, do the census. Don't let them have to guess.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah.
small world. I can't even pronounce imputation. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. No, but it's also, I mean, it tries to use informed decisions, right? So we will look and see what the person's race and ethnicity was 10 years ago, but say they're new to that household. So, we'll try to use some other existing sources to try to inform that moment. But you're absolutely right. Fill it out. Self-response. Self-identify. Just in that way, you take any kind of statistical information decision making off the table.
I like it. That should be another slogan for you. Self-identify. Don't let anybody else tell you, the government, who you are.
Exactly.
Unless of course you're illegal or like pushing drugs or something, then we don't even care about you. Not you.
Okay, so I can probably try to answer some question that's baked in there, but Laura, did you have another question? Are there any questions from the listeners?
No, people definitely comment. Everybody's listening very intently and nobody's speaking. So please, if you have questions for Robin, do ask them. But this is good stuff though. But I do have a question. I mean, the census has been around for so long. You said the 1700s. Obviously, we've been doing this for quite some time. So what's new with the 2020 census? What's changed this year that hadn't been a part of the previous counts?
Okay, thank you for that question. So I think I want to answer that question with confidentiality first. So I'm going to answer, but then my answer question I kind of want to answer. So I'll be honest. So this far along into our conversation, I have not said the phrase confidentiality enough. And here's why I say that. Because Karen asked an excellent question around how we would determine the race or ethnicity of that person in that particular household. At the end of the day, though, it's all about aggregated statistics. So nobody can then go back and look up, hey, what did Karen fill out her census? Or what did Robin put on her census? Or what did Laura put on her census? That individual level data is confidential, and it's kept confidential. I am sworn for life to keep that information confidential. Anyone who does the 2020 census, whether it's the census taker at the door, or it's a contractor that's working on the IT system, or a career professional like me, or the director who was named last year, we are all sworn for life to keep the individual level data confidential. And so that means ICE, I can't and will not cooperate if Department of Homeland Security's ICE calls up and says, hey, I hear you're collecting information. We do not share information with other federal agencies. We do not share with HHS. So if you're worried about your Medicaid eligibility, that your benefits determination or your Social Security determination is going to be impacted by our information that we're collecting, it's not. We only release aggregated statistics because of our confidentiality oath. Yes, ma'am.
And there's no way to change that. So in other words, as in this world where rules and laws seem to be changing, policies, are just being shifted a bit all the time, will that hold? If under new administration, under, who knows what, could someone say, you know what, now I want to break in and get that census data?
So it is a statute. So it's Title 13 of the U.S. Code. And so to change it, you would have to have an act of Congress. So you would have to have both houses of Congress agree to the legislation, and then you'd have to have the president sign it. And so theoretically, is there a way that you could modify Title 13? Yes. But it has been our bedrock for a very long time, and the members of Congress recognize the importance of the confidentiality oath because people are cooperating because we tell them they have to fill this out. But you need trust in that it's going to be kept safe.
Right.
The individual level information will be kept safe. Okay. And so that's the answer. And then I will also say we're a statistical agency, and our culture is data stewardship. And so everything we do has that layer of confidentiality in it. So when we were doing this planning for this, like I wouldn't have been able to do it on certain platforms. Like there's certain, it's just that level of security that sometimes drives all of us bonkers, but it's there for a reason. So Laura, sorry, I wanted to get into the confidentiality conversation a little bit because it does color everything that we do. So when I say safe, easy, and important, that safe part has to be believed, because Karen alluded to undocumented persons. We count everyone who lives in the United States. So if you live here, you should be counted. And so the trust has to be believed, and partners like you help us get that word out.
So that you even count, for instance, if a census taker was walking down the street and saw a homeless man sitting on the ground, would he or she go up to that homeless person and try to get their information to count them?
Yes. So there is a special enumeration we do for persons experiencing homelessness. We try to work with, so we do we go outside. So in your example, we would try to count that person during a period of time, because you don't want to keep going back. And if the person's highly mobile, you feel like you might be double counting. So we have a period of time. We also, so we'll do like transitory locations like RV parks, hotels, things like that, to try to think through the unhomed person, how to count. The other thing we do for homeless persons is it's called service-based enumeration. Sorry, another one of those, SBE. And so we do that count September 22nd to the 24th. So it's 3 days. And we'll do that in soup kitchens, scheduled mobile food vans, other direct service providers that provide care to homeless persons. We go out and we do that special enumeration so that we try to, and we send a whole team to do this, to try to get everyone. So that way you're doing it at a period of time, and then you're trying to blanket the community. So that's how we do persons experiencing homelessness.
Thank you.
But I will say the cool thing about what's new, and I think that was what Laura asked me a while ago, is that the internet is in many ways an equalizer though too. So now that libraries are opening up a little bit more, or now that some people who are highly mobile do have access to a phone, if you're unhomed, you can still fill out the form. So you can go online, or you can call us up, and we will take your information. And the form is nimble enough that you just have to describe where you usually live. You can actually say, I usually live off of Route 1 at the corner of, Sherwood Hall or whatever. So, I mean, you can, it doesn't have to be an actual city style address for when we do that count. So I'd encourage, if you have persons who haven't done the form yet, and they were unhomed around April 1st, then they absolutely can do it that way too. Or we'll try to count them during the service-based enumeration. Also, that reminds me, when is the count? So we talked about when we'll stop the collection, but the reference date is April 1st. So we're now a little ways away from April 1st. But when you fill out the form, it asks you, where did you usually live on April 1st? And that way we can, again, do that where it's the geographic side of the count.
Robin, I'm so glad you brought that up. Real quick, Laura, I'm sorry if I'm jumping ahead to review.
Oh, no, you're good.
One of the questions I had asked for the audience, one of the questions I had asked Robin when we first planned this show was, how is COVID impacting the census? I mean, what happens if all these people who unfortunately and sadly are dying every single day, if they all did the census, then the census can't be right. And Robin very quickly explained that the census is, let's see how much I learned, Robin. The census is a snapshot in time from that day in April. And everyone who was alive on that day is counted. So even if you don't fill out your census form until September 15th, the question you're answering is, where did you live on April 1st, 2020? Right?
Exactly.
So therefore, it's not COVID affects everything on the planet, but it's not necessarily affecting the data that is collected, because the truth is that person was alive and living in that space on
Exactly.
April 1st, right?
Right. And we would not go back and alter that data if the person has since passed. It is as of April 1st. And
Right.
so it's the same notion too about births too. So if you had your baby on March 13th, you know, he or she is little, but make sure the baby gets counted because he or she is alive as of April 1st. So it's the same notion. It's a point in time. It's and April 1st is our reference day. So
Well, I should think that would help a lot because that baby's going to be a 10-year-old before the next census, and he's going to need a school. He's going to need this. He's going to need that. So it makes sense.
Yeah. And so, and a colleague just reminded me on my confidentiality spiel, which I go big with it, is that we do release data after 72 years. So for those who love the genealogy idea, you know, if you want to see your ancestors and all that, we do it's actually through the archives. So NARA, we release the data. So you can go back in 72 years, you can see what your family filled out for 2020, and you can go back obviously too. So, the notion, the 72 years, I guess, is the idea of most folks won't be alive, so therefore it won't.
Right. It's like presidential archive. That's a really good point because, you know, we're always hearing about people who went on to ancestry.com or something and they looked at the census during the Civil War. And I'm sure there's somebody in this audience who's going, wait a minute, I got to go to the census. But that was certainly more than 72 years ago.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, yeah, if anybody's a nerd like me and watches like Know Your Roots with Henry Louis Gates Jr. on PBS, obviously he's always going back to the census and look what your ancestors did. But it was, you know, it's not the 2020 census, you know, it's not the 2010 census.
When you're feeling bad, Robin, watch that because those census were taken by hand. I mean, the handwriting.
Yeah. No, although I will say there's parts of the larger community that's sad that we're online because you won't see the handwriting. And so, which I understand, but it's one of those moments where we're like, well, but at least you'll have the data. And so,
exactly. And we do want to mention real quick for our viewers, because we do have a lot of viewers that are not in the US. So they may be wondering, why do I care about the US Census? But I think it is important to have this conversation for everybody because every country does their own population count. So we want to make sure that all of our viewers, no matter where they are, know that they should be participating in their population count too. Because it matters to us as women without children because, you know, again, that's what informs the data, the fertility data and things like that over time. So it's important that we get counted so that people know we're there. So it doesn't matter where you are, but for people in the US, it matters right now to make sure that you get counted.
Absolutely.
That's a great point. And we are part of the US Census Bureau is part of the UN actually has a statistical office, the United Nations. And so we collaborate internationally as well. We learn an awful lot from other countries and how they do their counts. New Zealand did their population count a couple years before we did ours, and there was Australia as well, and so folks from New Zealand and Australia will be like, Robin, they're not the same countries. I know, but there were some hiccups with the internet tool that they had launched it on the same day instead of sort of rolling it out. And so that was a learning for us that we said, let's maybe do like a soft launch of our internet tool and then sort of gradually open it up. And so we kind of did that. And so we do learn from other countries when it comes to how to do our statistics. So mandatory versus voluntary is one that's not just a US question. It's a question that many countries grapple with. When you don't make it mandatory, your response rates go down dramatically. But what does that mean for privacy? There's some really awesome sort of big picture questions that not the U.S. is not the only one that grapples with them. That statistical agencies across the world do as well. Some stat agencies have the government sort of built differently how the data collection happens. There are some countries that do registries, and so it's already done. It's not that big of a deal. We don't have to do the ginormous advertising campaign. So yeah, it's very fascinating to watch the different ways that different countries do the work. Stats Canada for us, since they're just right north of us, it's a huge partner as far as doing work. We have an international office at the Census Bureau to try to do a lot of that collaboration. We'll have, when it wasn't COVID, we'll actually have delegations come and do visits at the Census Bureau. So we appreciate the thinking across the world when it comes to statistics. And that you all could learn from us, we can learn from you. Some of the questions that we ask, Karen was saying, and I was saying self-identification is really important. We get part of our respondents are really not pleased with how we ask the questions, though, and that can evolve over time as well. So that's where public input to the process throughout the decade really, really helps. And so a great, for instance, is we did not have sexual orientation, gender identity on the 2020 census. We do have partner status, so you can list if you have a same-sex partner, but there's not a SOGI question on the 2020 census. And so those, yes, ma'am.
What is SOGI?
Sexual orientation, gender identity.
Thank you.
Sorry.
All right, continue.
So it's a great for instance, though, as far as there's always room for improvement. There's always new ways to collect the information. There's always new ways to identify as well. And so the Census Bureau has a hand in that, but we also rely on the Office of Management and Budget in the United States. That's where our chief statistician is. So I'd encourage folks to keep paying attention throughout the decade if there's worries about how we ask the questions. We get a lot of pushback around Hispanic and Latino. The United States captures that data as an ethnicity and not a race. And so is there a better way to do that? That I think those discernments have to keep going so that we can do a better job of it.
So if someone wanted to, for lack of a better word, make a complaint to the Census Bureau or a suggestion to, how would they do it? Is there space on the website, 2020census.gov, to do
there
that?
Is. Yeah, there is. If you go to, or you go to our main page too, just census.gov. And then if you type in Ask the Census, there's a way to send feedback into our customer liaison office. So we will take the feedback. So, and I can get you.
I have not heard that anywhere. I feel like we've got a breaking story, Laura. You can if you want. And give ideas. Share your ideas. That's really good.
And I can try to remember to get you that but more direct information, Karen. The other real important office for the Census Bureau is we have what we call a respondent advocate. And so that person, and there's a few of them, helps the respondent understand their rights. And if there's worries, that person is an advocate, and it's a separate office and they often field questions like, who is this person at my door? like trying to help understand those. It's questions like, is this required for me to fill this out? Like, it's those types of questions. So the respondent advocate is a wonderful office, and they're getting questions that are often asked about, like, why is the question asked this way as well? So
it's sort of like an ombudsman.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's been an important moment because you had asked about the long form, Karen, which is the American Community Survey. And so that is 72 questions. So most folks, when they see the 2020 census, they'll be like, it's 9 questions. What was all the big deal about? But and it's very quick, especially if there's only a few of you in the household. But the long form we used to do as a sample at the same time that we were doing the short form. And we, as the Census Bureau, decided that it would be better to collect the data over the decade in a rolling way. And so we now do, I think it's 3.5 million addresses every year. we sample for the American Community Survey. And so what Karen referred to as the long form is really now the American Community Survey. And we roll that through the decade and release data through the decade. So that way it's a win-win for everybody. It's not hitting at the same time as hard during the decennial. And then it also gives data more currently throughout the decade. But that one we get some complaints about because it's 72 questions. So.
Laura,
Right.
I know we got to wrap it, but can I ask one more question?
All right, yes, we're getting close, but I think we've got time for a couple more questions.
But I'm learning so much. I'm learning more than I thought I would learn because we've already huddled with Robin. But Robin, my question is, and I would like to think I'm not the only one thinking such a rude thought. You've explained in very easy to understand all of the work that the Census Bureau does with the census decennial. Did I say it right?
Decennial.
Decennial. Okay, decennial. But I can't help but think that there's someone who might be wondering, okay, so that you do all this work, but the next census won't be until 2030.
Mm-hmm.
What the heck do you do in those 10 years? Do you just sit around crunching all these numbers? Are you sitting working and planning the next one? What in short, a brief answer, can you help us understand what the day-to-day, once you finally can say, oh, thank goodness that September 31st, October 1st, and there's, we're done. What do you do for 10 years?
So I mentioned we do about 150 other products or collections of information every year. So we have demographic programs, we have economic programs, we have research and methodology. So decennial, it gets all the bright lights on it, but we have 150 other things that we're collecting, including economic indicators, as I mentioned, and including helping with like the unemployment rate. So we're that for the country. And so we also have the Pulse survey for those who would like a real understanding of how the COVID pandemic is affecting the country. We have a small business and a demographic Pulse survey that if you go to our website, you can see it. And it's weekly. It's a weekly release on how the COVID pandemic is affecting the country and dramatically. So we're super busy. The big show is the 2020 census, but we're doing collections for 150 other information. We also collect for other parts of the government too. So like transportation, some other places, they'll also hire us to do those collections. If I could do a plug, Laura and Karen, for what I would ask all the listeners to think about is just think through your networks. Who do you talk to? Do you have a place of worship that you're engaged with? Are you alums? Do you have, like with your college? Do you sit on community boards? Are you active on social media? All those places that you are engaging with the external world, please encourage everyone to fill out their form. There is a deadline now. It's September 30th. So if folks don't fill it out, they're not going to be counted, or we're going to have to figure out how to count them. So it's about self-identification. Self-response is happening now. Make you fill it out, or your census taker will come to your door. Cooperate with that person. That person is there to get that information as well, and he or she will be in PPE. So they're trying to do it safely as well. So please think through your networks. In your family too. So if you have some family members who you hadn't asked, ask. And you could give them the phone number to fill it out. If they're not internet people, my mom's not internet people, and so give them the tools to actually do the census, and it'll make all the difference. So thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Wow.
No, that was going to be exactly my last question. And I am gonna, while you're still here, I've got some slides that I want to put up so that our viewers can see. Of course, we already talked about this, what the 2020 census is for, but more importantly for our viewers at home, so that they know to go to the 2020census.gov and enter their information, get the information to call, mail it in, however people want to do it, needs to have it done by September 30th. So we really appreciate you being on the show with us today, Robin. This has been very enlightening, and honestly, we could have talked for hours.
I know.
And I can say decennial.
What, Karen?
I can say decennial. I'm going to say it all the
now
time.
You need to use it in conversation regularly.
I'm going to just keep rolling it off. It's going to be great.
Well, we're so thankful to not for your partnership and all that you're helping to do to get the word out. So thank you for having me on. I was so happy to do it.
We will continue to use our social networks to promote it, and we've got a whole month, you know, and some weeks till September 30th. So we won't give up either. You've helped us know better than we ever did before how important it is.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So we want to thank everybody who watched, and certainly, you know, if you're not watching live, we still encourage you to ask questions. We can always get the answers for you. But thanks again, Robin, and thanks for everybody who watched, and thanks, Karen.
Thank you, Laura.